I think the primary tool is to have some type of vendor qualification procedures. That's important. Within the vendor qualification processes or procedures, you need a pre-qualification process, you need a qualification process, and a re-qualification process. Let me explain the difference. The pre-qualification process is basically a good tool to, it's a questionnaire that we send to the vendor. We ask for specific high-level types of questions, such as, how long have you been in business? What are your services? How many staff do you have? What types of offerings do you have when it comes to your services? Are there any particular reservations about doing business with the kinds of things that we need you for? So the questionnaire is going to also ask for specific documentation. It's very high level once again, but we might ask for a table of contents for their SOPs to see if they've got procedures available. We'll also probably ask them for any FDA inspection history documentation if they've experienced one within the past maybe 5 or 10 years. Can we get a copy of that? So we'll pre-qualify them by sending them a questionnaire, bringing that information back in-house, internalizing it, and we'll take a look at that and we'll say, hey, do you think it's worth pursuing this company? So you might have 2 or 3 CROs on the hook, or vendors on the hook, I should say, for service. And this is a good tool to help minimize or weed them out. After that, we go into the qualification process. The qualification process is basically, now that we've got your list of table of contents, we're going to go out there and we're going to do a qualification audit, which is taking a more in-depth look at their processes and procedures. Just because they've got an SOP that's on the list of the table of contents doesn't necessarily mean it's robust enough to satisfy our needs. There may be procedures that we are specifically looking for that they don't have, or they might be disguised inside of their table of contents list where it's not really a separate SOP. It might be embedded in another SOP. So we're looking at the procedures that they have, very much so in depth, so that way we can verify that they do have the capabilities and qualifications to do so. But the problem is, just because they have the procedures doesn't necessarily mean they follow the procedures. So then we go into the requalification process. The requalification process is when we're actually taking the data that they've generated during study conduct. We will take a look at that data and we will match that against the available procedures. These are the procedures that they are abiding by, and we're going to determine compliance. So when doing so, we're going to actually see whether they are practicing what they've written in their procedures.
The kind of tools that you want to have in place are what we talked about a little bit before, which is the request for information, your RFI. You want to make sure that you're asking all the right questions that you need to ask based upon those things that are important to you. The second thing is, once you send out that RFI and you whittle down to maybe, let's say, 3 to 5 CRO vendors within that particular category, then you want to make sure that you have a request for proposal. That request for proposal is got to be as detailed as you can possibly make it. Now, if you have a clinical operations person on board, they'll be able to do that. If you don't, you could certainly hire an outsourcing professional to make that happen. But what I will tell you is, the more detailed, the better that proposal is going to be. And often what you find is small biotechs will just send a CRO just some high-level specs. Don't just send specs, send assumptions as well, right? Send all of your expectations on what you are looking for so that that proposal can come back as granular as it possibly can. Then, I'll be honest, I just use an Excel spreadsheet and I ask each of these CROs from a budgetary perspective to fill out my spreadsheet rather than supply their own. Now, they can supply their own as well, and we all know that every CRO does things a little bit different, but the more standardized you can get it, the better. And then that way, as much as possible, you can compare apples to apples. And don't forget the allocation. So I think if you have those tools in place, and those are also, by the way, attached to your outsourcing plan, then you'll be on your way to being able to really conduct a good comparison with your team.